Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Oscilla Power Investor Q&A webinar. We're really excited you've made time to come and join us today and learn more about Oscilla Power, their mission, vision, and speak with the executive team directly. Let me briefly introduce myself first. My name is Damaris Morse. I'm the operations manager at Digital Niche Agency, and I'll be your moderator today. Balky, Tim, why don't you give a brief introduction for the attendees while we let people just come in for the next few minutes?
Yeah, I'm Balky Nair. I'm the president and CEO of Oscilla Power. I'm also a founder. I've been with the company since its inception, and look forward to taking your questions and trying to give you a better picture of what Oscilla Power is all about. Tim.
Hi there, my name's Tim Mundon. I'm the CTO for Oscilla Power. I've got a background in engineering and wave energy specifically, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on the technology or approach that we're taking.
Awesome, guys. Thank you. Today is all about you guys, attendees, and your questions. So please feel free to drop your questions today in the Q&A. I will be moderating that group and reading questions out loud to the Oscilla Power team. So I really encourage you, to ask your questions and ask anything. We're here to be your ear. We're here to listen to you and get all your burning questions answered. I want to remind everyone that Oscilla Power is doing a capital raise right now on StartEngine. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that link down for you in the chat feature. And just a quick disclosure as well, there are some things that we can't talk about specifically regarding the terms of the agreement. So anything regarding the terms, I really encourage you to drop your questions on the StartEngine page directly. And if you ask a question that's regarding terms, I will let you know to go ahead and put that question on the StartEngine page. It's just for compliance purposes. We want to get your questions answered, and not to say we can't answer those questions. We just can't answer them on this live event, again, for compliance reasons. So if you have a terms related question, I'm going to direct you to the StartEngine page where you can learn more about the terms of the offering. So let me go ahead and grab that for you guys right now. I'm just curious, where is everyone from? Go ahead, drop it in the chat. I'm currently hailing from LA, Long Beach. Balky, Tim, where are you guys at right now?
We're both in Seattle. We are in the same building, but we are in different offices. Just for, I'm sitting on top of Balky right
now. Okay, got it. Nice. Curious where everyone is from, so let us know where you guys are at. It's great that we can use technology to come together despite the distances. Okay, attendees, I am dropping down the StartEngine raise page right now for any questions regarding the terms of the offering and just more general information as well regarding Oscilla Power, wave energy, the Triton C. I really encourage you to check it out. There's so much great information on that page, and you can leave your questions and comments there as well. And don't forget to follow the campaign page. There's a little heart button on StartEngine page where you can follow it, and you'll get all the updates from Oscilla Power directly in your inbox. So that saves so much time. It's just going to come right to it at the top of your box. We got Phil, he's from Seattle area. Nice. Phil, also where Oscilla Power is right now. George from North Carolina. George, thank you for coming. Yancy from Texas. Henning from Norway. Wow. Michael, we have Virginia. We have some people from California. Thomas, California. John from California. Well, thank you guys for coming. We're really excited that you're here, and we have such a great variety as well of from lots of different places. So let's get right into it. We would like to first play the StartEngine campaign video for you guys. We understand we might have some new faces today that are new to the campaign, some that, some people that are already familiar with Oscilla Power as well. But just so everyone's on the same page, I'm going to quickly share my screen and play the StartEngine video for you. So let me get that pulled up. And then from there, we're going to dive right into whatever questions you have. So at any time, feel free to start dropping your questions in the Q&A. So let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Alrighty. So let me just expand it here and play.
Wave energy is one of the last massive untapped renewable resources that represents a $30 billion annual market and a gigaton scale carbon reduction opportunity. Oscilla Power aims to bring the first commercially viable ocean wave energy systems to market.
Oscilla Power is developing the Triton and the Triton C wave energy devices. The Triton works by extracting energy in all modes of motion. Waves move the surface float of the Triton, which generates power inside 3 separate power takeout units. We can combine those together to be able to create more constant power. We spent a lot of time really getting the shape just right so that it moves as much as possible in ocean waves.
Because the Triton is the first of its kind, we've spent several years completing 2 types of analysis to understand how the device performs. We start out with a numerical model of the device. We then build small physical prototypes of the device and test them in the laboratory.
In wave energy, we have the opportunity to solve problems by providing reliable and sustainable energy to coastal communities.
Wave energy is a really important part of the energy mix because it's complementary to solar and wind. By mixing these 3 renewables together, we're able to significantly increase the amount of renewables that we can put onto the grid.
Wave energy has never been commercially deployed at a meaningful scale before, and we want to be the first people to do that.
Your investment will help us to construct and test the Triton C, our first commercial wave energy device. This will help us to reduce the cost of ocean energy and make a cleaner environment.
With your help in our fundraising campaign, we hope to be generating power in Hawaii by early next year.
Thank you for watching. If you choose to invest, we'll make sure that we do everything in our power to make your investment a wise one.
Nice. I love that video, especially the team shot at the end. So dramatic. I love it. I have a quick question for you guys. Why wave energy in the first place? What inspired you to go after this notoriously challenging clean energy?
Yeah, let me take that one. So 2 parts to that question. One is the pure business aspect of it. If you think about renewable energy as a whole, one of the gaps there that's been well recognized is the issue of being able to provide 24/7 renewable power. As it is right now, if you only add solar and wind to the grid, the goal of getting to 24/7 renewables seems really far away because the amount of storage that we add to the grid and the amount of the sources themselves that you add to the grid becomes so large. So wave energy tends to be an excellent complement that's large enough, and it tends to be more complementary in the sense that it produces electricity at different times of day, different times of different seasons compared to when, say, solar peaks. That adding that to the grid reduces the amount of storage that we need to add to the grid. So it's an excellent way to get to that goal of 24/7 renewables without having to add so much capacity and so much storage in the front end. So that's the business part. From the standpoint of why we'd want to do this in general, if we don't do something along these lines, it could be wave energy, it could be other sources. The current projections are that by 2050, solar and wind will continue to grow tremendously as they are continuing to grow right now. But despite that, demand will outpace that growth. And by 2050, we'll actually be burning more fossil fuels in 2050 than what we're doing right now. So we're sort of going in the wrong direction there. So there really is no way around it other than to add complementary sources. And ocean wave energy tends to be one of those best sources out there.
Tim, any thoughts on that question? Or I feel like Balky provided a very comprehensive answer as well, but just wanted to know if you wanted to add any color to that.
I don't really have anything to add other than to kind of emphasize the point about really making a difference to the overall energy mix. That's
100.
I'm sure we'll touch on that and a few other questions later.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, what advantages does the Triton and the Triton C have over other, your other competitors? I know there are a few people also looking to be some of the first to tap into wave energy. So what advantages do you have right now?
Sure, maybe I can take that one, Balky. Yeah, so the really, people have been trying to solve the wave energy problem now since I think the first patent was actually in 1799, which is kind of crazy. But over the last 20 to 30 years, people have really started to be able to develop new solutions, workable solutions to this problem. And there's a lot of different concepts out there. I just want to start by saying that. These lot of different wave energy devices look very different to other different devices. It's not like, when we're in, if you look at wind turbines, everything seems to kind of move towards a three-bladed turbine, and you're talking about relatively incremental improvements. We're still very much in kind of a wide range of solutions. However, that being said, we believe our solution has a number of distinct advantages over other approaches. Probably the biggest advantage we feel like our system has is that we can capture energy in, as you saw in the video, in a full 6 degrees of freedom. So that means basically, however the waves move the surface float, that all translates into energy capture. If you look at other wave energy devices, a lot of them, in fact, the majority of them, all typically move in one primary motion, whether it be a flap that moves backwards and forwards, whether it be something that bobs up and down and just in heave, and they capture energy just from that mode. In our system, because of the way it works, it's self-referenced. You have your float and then you have your ring that hangs below it. It can move in heave, it can also move in surge, it can roll, it can pitch. And of course, waves will come from all different directions. They will be motion in all different angles. They have a kind of very particular type of motion that will excite in all different directions. And so we can capture energy from all of those. And what that ultimately means is that our efficiency as a device will be higher than other approaches. That's probably the key reason where we would differentiate from other approaches. But there's also others. The other approach, the other area really is, our efficiency within the system itself. So, we can extract the energy from the waves efficiently, but we can also translate that mechanical energy into electrical energy efficiently. We have spent a lot of time and effort being able to develop the power takeout unit that we have. And that power takeout unit is designed to be able to develop smoother power than other systems. So we can provide a more constant power to the grid. And then and another, I think, relevant approach, and there's a long list, I could keep going on all day, but another area is, of course, in terms of installability. One of the biggest costs for putting any sort of device in the ocean is the installation and maintenance of it. You've got to get a big boat, you've got to get it out shore, get it out offshore. You have to have like large infrastructure to put it out there. So we've really worked on minimizing those costs. And so our system can be towed out to site with relatively small vessels and then positioned in place and set to operating again without the need for heavy lift or specialized vessels. So that's another real key advantage. And I think the last one I wanted to mention as well is the survivability aspect. We have a way of being able to survive the most extreme storms and still continue to generate power in those extreme storms as well. And that gives us another advantage.
Yeah, let's discuss survivability a little bit more. So what is survivability? What does that mean? And what is the survivability strategy for the Triton C?
Of course. So what we're talking about in terms of survivability, what we're saying is that when you have waves that get beyond a certain point, then what do? There is a huge amount of energy in big waves. If you have something that's just sitting on the surface of the ocean and you have a big wave, that energy's got to go somewhere. And typically we'll go to the device going into either breaking or exceeding the device's limits. And that's not a good thing, obviously. What we do in our approach is actually we avoid that energy by going below the surface, or just below the surface. And what that does, what we do in practice is we ballast the float so that it actually sinks down just a little bit until it's just level with the surface, effectively neutrally buoyant. And that detunes the system. And then also it allows the waves to go over the system, and therefore the energy does not get transmitted to the system. So, and even though it's detuned, it's still generating power, albeit a lot less power in those extreme cases. Or should I say it's got a lot less efficiency in those extreme cases. So the extreme waves don't transfer the energy to the device, but it's still extracting a small amount of energy from those extreme waves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Attendees, if you have any questions about survivability, as it's a really interesting topic, and we actually have some really cool videos on social media. If you follow Oscilla Power on Instagram or Facebook, there are some videos showcasing some early testing of the survivability system. And basically you can see the float basically getting pulled down below the surface. So I really encourage you to look at those videos, and feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A if you have questions about it as well. I want to talk about product. So I know there's a Triton and the Triton C, and for new attendees here, I want to explain the difference. So either Balky, Tim, why do you have the Triton? Why do you have the Triton C, and what are the differences between the two?
Yeah, maybe I can take that one, Tim. So the way we think about product is we see the large opportunity as being utility scale power. So our flagship product, the Triton, is aimed at that market really. The sizing of that is about a 1 megawatt size device. And beyond that, we think that the farms could be 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts, even larger, but it would be 50 of those units or 100 of those units that constitute those farms. The largest device would be of that size. That being said, there are also always niche applications where you either don't need that much power, or a smaller device is just more attractive. And that it usually will be in single applications. So when we don't need a farm with a device, you only need, say, 100 kilowatts of power. That's where the Triton C comes in. Examples are sort of, if you think about applications related to the term that's called powering the blue economy, PBE as DOE calls it. These are sort of smaller applications. Think about a charging station for AUVs is one example, autonomous underwater vehicles. You don't necessarily need a megawatt of power for that, but 100 kilowatts of power goes a long way. And the Triton C system is aimed at those single one-off applications that don't require that much power, but can lead to early business opportunities in specific spots where the cost of electricity is not the driving factor. It's the fact that ocean energy is the only easily available resource in that location, and it can offer some advantages over other types of energy that's available out there. So those are the two primary products that we split along. We are also looking at even smaller systems for the PBE lines, including some custom applications for military applications or for sensing or surveillance. These might be even smaller than the 100 kilowatt number that I talked about, more like, say, a device that might be a few meters in size that can provide 100 watts of power potentially. We are working on a project that can power a radar system for sensing that can be deployed offshore as an example. Tim, did you want to add anything to that?
I would just say that we're fully. It's worth noting that this smaller applications definitely will be. We feel are a nearer term market application, but we don't feel are a long-term big revenue generator for the company as a whole. That focus is definitely maintained on the utility scale, and that's where our primary focus continues to lie. But in the short term, smaller systems are very attractive, and there is a need for them literally right now. And the smaller system is also much easier to get to market and to build a prototype and to test it in a much faster space of time.
Right. And to clarify, like for the audience, so the Triton C is a much smaller device. It produces 100 kilowatts of power, and the Triton is a utility concept design. It's huge and produces 1 megawatts, and it's designed to be connected and scale, like connected to each other. Correct, Tim? Like where you could see basically like a system of 10 to 20 Tritons connected, all driving power back to shore.
That's correct. They would always be installed in arrays ultimately.
Right. So can you talk a little bit more about how would the power actually get back to shore, and like what's involved in that process?
Sure. Okay, so I think let's differentiate things a little bit. So if we talk about the Triton C, first of all, which is the system that I think many of the people on the call are aware of that's currently new. And then the Triton is one that we're developing right now to a larger scale. But the Triton C, for a start, because it's a one-off system, it may or may not be connected to the grid, to the shore. And anything you put offshore, you have to connect to a load somehow. And the typical approach is basically a long underwater extension cord. It's a little more advanced than that, but basically a big power cord that goes underneath the water. As the technology really is in how you maybe connect that device to the cable to your device, and maybe how that dynamic movement is kind of accounted for in the cable for fatigue and that aspect. So, but ultimately, it's a pretty straightforward approach to connect it. Now, that would be the Triton C, where it's a single one-off. Now, if we start talking about the Triton, where we're talking about utility scale, now really that's very much the same as the way offshore wind works. With what we would have is we would have multiple devices in an array. They would be connected together to a substation that would be also offshore, and then a larger cable would go from that substation to shore through an underwater cable. So again, it's technology that's been proven in the offshore wind industry for years.
Can you give us a sense of like how much can 100 kilowatts power? Like, is that a home? Is that 2 homes? Just like
About 20 houses or so.
Okay. And then what about 1 megawatt system? How much can that power? And like, if you are connecting them in series, what can that power?
So it would be about 200 to 300 houses for a megawatt unit or so. But really, it would depend on how large you build the array. It's scalable to whatever land or whatever ocean area you have, and what you want to be able to provide to the grid.
Awesome. I have a great question from Michael. He's asking a good question about location. So how do you guys decide where these devices are going to be installed, and how do you determine where the best locations for wave energy are, and would they be close to shipping lanes, and how do you minimize like the risk of collisions, as there's so much competition for offshore areas?
All right, yeah, and actually that's a really good question. People have been looking at that for a long time. I think it's worth noting that first of all, let me first acknowledge you're absolutely right. There is a ton of kind of marine use currently, and there's a lot of competing users for that. But in the whole scheme of things, there isn't. It's a lot more different offshore than it is onshore. Now, before identifying where we would like to go, one of the key things to do would be to have an engagement with stakeholders to identify locations that are not, in the middle of a shipping lane, or that are not, heavily fished. So we'd be identifying those particular locations, and they do exist. These kind of siting studies or these areas have been identified on the US West Coast, and especially in other countries around the world. So there are areas to look at. The key factors that you're trying to identify as a developer perspective is that you want a really good wave energy resource. You want a lot of waves, you want a lot of energy there. But you also need a pretty good connection to shore as well. The cable cost is fairly significant, and so you ultimately don't want to be running it a lot further than you have to. And you want to make sure that you've got a substation to be able to connect into the grid on the other side of things. So really, it's a balance between high wave resource, location to substation, and then taking into account those other marine users.
Awesome. I know we also have done like an article as well on like some of the top best locations for wave energy as well. So please feel free to check that article out. It's on the StartEngine page in the update section. So I encourage you guys to read that article where Balky discusses some of the most attractive and lucrative areas for wave energy currently, which includes, the West Coast of the USA, places in Europe, India, etc. So definitely check that out. I'm getting a question from anonymous attendee actually about India. Thank you for your question, anonymous attendee. India has a tremendous resilience on coal-fired power generation, and I know it's one of your key target markets that you plan on deploying a unit there, specifically the Triton, anonymous attendee. So where do you see the potential of the Indian market within the next 5 years? Balky, I think that's a really good question for you.
Yeah, it's a very near-term market, actually. India is making a big push towards renewable energy currently. They have aggressive goals for transitioning to newer sources and a larger penetration of renewable energy by 2030. There are plans in place to try to get to all EVs, electric vehicles in India by that same time frame. Of course, it doesn't make sense to go to just EVs if all of that power has to come from burning coal. So transitioning to a 24/7 renewable energy infrastructure becomes really critical. So we are seeing quite a bit of pull from the Indian market. In a sense, if we were product ready right now, I do see that we could have opportunities to get in a large way. We're trying to get to that point. From the standpoint of where in India, it's the west coast of India. It turns out in general, because of the Earth's rotation, that it's the west coast of continents and countries in general that have better wave resources. And even in India, it's the west coast that has a better resource. And it's the southwest coast of India that has the strongest wave energy potential. We see India as a good market. It won't be the largest market by any stretch because it's not the strongest wave energy resource. It has sort of a limited incident energy out there, but it's a good early market for us to go into because of the current pull. We also see it as an opportunity to establish manufacturing capacity to a certain point where we can grow from there. If you look at the history of solar and why costs were driven down, it was the ability to scale and to get to low-cost locations. We see similar advantages possible by utilizing the local Indian market to get to scale.
And Balky, weren't you in India recently? We did a brief update on it where you shot a video actually at one of the sites that you're looking at in India. Can you speak to that visit a little bit more?
Yeah, it's the location is at the southwestern tip of India, near the city of Trivandrum or Thiruvananthapuram. It's a port that's being constructed by one of the largest conglomerates in India called Adani. And we have an agreement with the port that they will actually purchase the power from the first megawatt scale system that we install out there at a fairly attractive price. I shot the video at that location, sort of explaining why that was attractive. There's a bit of a history of wave energy there. Turns out that one of the longest running ocean wave energy projects in the world ever was run at that site. Went from about 1992 to 2011 or so, I believe. It was an older technology, but they nevertheless persisted with it and provided power to the grid for a fairly long period of time.
Mm-hmm. And I dropped that video, everyone, by the way, in the chat where you can listen to Balky and see the wave demonstration site behind him as well. So I really encourage you to watch that brief update. It's a really short video, less than 3 minutes. So take the time, watch it. It's very informative. Okay, I have a question.
I have a question from, looks like there's a question from Phil. Can we take that one? It's
Sure.
Phil's one of the larger investors.
Yeah, sure. Phil, thanks for your question. There's actually a few questions that are similar to Phil's as well. So what's the latest update on the Hawaii project? Will investors and interested parties be able to view some kind of dashboard showing how much energy it is producing? As you guys know, the Triton C is currently out in Hawaii. We've been posting a lot of great updates, and I really encourage you to follow the StartEngine updates page, where we are posting those updates very frequently regarding the Triton C. But Balky, what's the latest on the Triton C?
I'll pass that on to Tim.
Okay.
Maybe we could provide that. I saw a few questions coming in, so I appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about this. So yeah. The Triton C, it's assembled, it's in the water, it's working is as in some sense of the word, but it's currently at berth in Honolulu Harbor. So basically, over the last 3 or 4 months, Hawaii has seen actually some pretty nasty weather and consistent weather, which has actually kept the waves really quite high on the north side of the island, which is where we're going to deploy. Now, that's great for power generation, not so great if you're actually trying to get the system there. So we've basically just been prevented from towing the system around the island to the deployment location. To compound that, the Navy the Navy needs to do some upgrades to the site in order for us to go there as well. And so the contractor for the Navy needs good weather to be able to get there and do that work as well. So that kind of bumps us back a little bit in order to before we can actually get out there. So it's frustrating. So far, those upgrades have been about 30 to 40% complete. They still need quite a bit of time there to do that. At this point, it's tough to give an actual date, but We're hoping that we can actually get we can get next in line and be available in about a month or so. But it's tough to be more certain than that. Apologies. To the second part of that, in terms of power, performance, dashboard, we have all of that infrastructure set up. And our expectation is to be able to provide some form of live feed on our website.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the Triton C being officially deployed. That will be a big day, and we'll continue to provide updates on these updates that the Navy is making, including to the anchors, which we recently wrote about on StartEngine. I know there's some updates anticipated for the electrical systems as well. So we'll keep you guys updated on those when they happen. And again, I really just encourage you to follow the StartEngine page, so you'll get those updates directly into your inbox, so you can make sure you're getting them right when they occur. I have a great question from anonymous attendee. We get this question a lot regarding wave energy devices in general, but do wave energy devices and your devices harm marine animals like whales or dolphins, or are there any systems in place to prevent sea mammals from getting entangled in the Triton C?
So yeah, let me answer that one. Actually, that is absolutely, it's a great question. It's one we get a lot, and it's something that we're super concerned with ourselves. We certainly don't want to endanger marine mammals, especially some of them are extremely endangered. So we don't want to make it worse. But to be clear, there's a couple of things to understand here. Is first of all, I can see how when people look at the system as a whole, they see the float, they see lines, and they think that maybe there's a possibility for entanglement there. But to be clear, the size of the system, the distance between the lines, is bigger than the size of a typical large marine mammal. We've got a system that's 30 meters long in general. And so we've got large distances between these lines. So it's not likely that we're going to have any marine mammals captured in that space. It's much bigger than what you would typically see. Second part of this is that the ropes themselves are always in tension, and very significant tension. We're talking tens to hundreds of tons on each of those lines as a minimum load. And so in order to get an entanglement issue, you have to have a slack line in order for that to happen. So we don't believe that that's going to be a risk there. And we've also got feedback from scientists at PNNL, and we are also we talk to them on a frequent basis. I was trying to find a better way of saying that. We talk to them on a frequent basis, and they are looking at our system, and we try to engage to make sure that there aren't any issues that are going to be problematic going forward.
Balky, do you want to add any color on that as well? I know we've discussed this, and there have been reports out there, and I can drop a report in the chat as well that show that wave energy devices do pose minimal impact or risk on marine environments. So Balky, anything you want to add there?
We are sometimes opportunistic when in our design in India, for example, which has slight variation of requiring a foundation. We talk to the local agencies and confirm that the design that we can use can actually be favorable to fishing, as one example. So it can essentially form a marine reef. So we could potentially be opportunistic where we are not only not doing any harm, but actually can do something positive as part of this, outside of simply producing renewable power.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to drop in the 2020 State of Science report. It's a great report. I really encourage people to browse it, but there are specific sections that speak to wave energy devices and how they do pose, the report reports that they do pose minimal impact to marine environment. So please feel free to read that. And if you have any questions regarding that, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A right now or on the StartEngine page. Oscilla Power is really happy to chat with that about that topic with you. A big interesting question from Richard. Richard, thanks for your question. Radio and microwave towers are marked visually with flashing beacons to warn impending air traffic of their presence. So will wave energy farms in the Triton C be marked with similar devices? Or if not, how do you plan on protecting them in the water from potentially being collided with?
It would be the same as any marine hazard, if you like. There's a particular set of guidelines that the Coast Guard require, and we would follow all of those. Plus the fact that we would have, and Triton C in Hawaii is a good example. There are radar beacons, for example, on each of the individual systems, plus AIS transponders, which mean that our system shows up on vessels' radar. So in terms of collision, we do everything that's possible to prevent impact, as well as brightly colored. The system itself is bright yellow. It has flashing lights. It's on charts, and it has radar and radio transmitters to broadcast its position. So it's everything we can do.
Awesome. I have a great question from Adam. Can you please discuss the expected lifespan of a Triton device, as well as the maintenance requirements and costs? It would be interesting to look like how much do the devices cost, right? And then how much power does it produce as well?
So I can talk to the expected lifespan. Okay. So that's about 20 to 25 years in terms of planned lifespan for the Triton system. Maintenance, obviously, we'll learn more after we do our first deployment. But the target is for regular maintenance at around about 2 to 5 year intervals. Minor maintenance, maybe more frequently that to start with, hopefully reducing as we learn more about the system and update the components. As for cost, maybe I can pass that question to Balky to kind of answer that.
Our target cost for the system in scale, so I'll qualify that by saying this is in large volume manufacturing. So it's not the cost of the very first utility scale system we'll be building. But once we are at scale and manufacturing, we expect to drive the cost down to about $2 million per installed megawatt is the target cost of the system.
Awesome. What are your guys' expected growth plan? So what are your goals for 2022 and for this year? Then what are your goals for the next 5-10 years to really grow and scale and be one of the first to provide utility scale ocean wave energy?
Yeah, let me take that one. So the two aspects, as I mentioned, we are looking at the end goal being to be a supplier of large-scale utility scale systems, but we realize that that takes a little time to build up and create that market in a sense. In the interim, after we do our demonstration of the Triton C, that becomes a product that we can then start to offer to folks and start some small-scale sales along that path. So in our small-scale systems, we expect to be ready to start taking orders in about a year. While for the larger systems, it'll be probably 2 to 2.5 years. We need to complete the design, development, demonstration, and deployment of a utility scale system before we can start to take orders on that. But we also, in parallel, expect to lay the groundwork for that. We already are doing that. So where the location that we are deploying our first system, our conversation is simply not about deployment of that first system. It's about where it can go from there. So the state utility, for example, has already expressed interest that they would like to, if successful, grow this to a larger number. It could be a 50 megawatt farm, for example, at the same location. It won't be the same exact location, but in the neighborhood of that, in a region that can be permitted and set aside for ocean wave energy potential. So there's a lot we can do in parallel, and that allows us to go very quickly from the demonstration of that first system to then taking an order to go up to the next 50 from there.
I can add a little bit to that as well in the near short term. In addition to the Triton C in the short term, there's also the smaller scale systems that we're developing as well that we may be able to generate sales from in the next 1 to 2 years, potentially at this point.
How like intellectual property wise, how are the Triton and the Triton C protected? Can you talk a little bit more about your patent strategy and any existing patents that you currently have?
Yeah, we have a significant number of patents. Again, you can look up the StartEngine, I don't recall the exact number, but it's in the 17 or so is the last I remember. And our strategy is really to, we don't have deep enough pockets to go out and patent every concept that we have in every geography around the world. world. But we take essentially a minefield approach to our patent strategy, where we have enough patents in enough locations where it becomes really difficult for somebody to navigate around us. So the locations of interest to us are the locations where ocean wave energy is likely. So we target more of a use rather than manufacturing approach. So, for example, we don't have a heavy patent coverage in China, which could be a likely manufacturing location, but it doesn't have a local, at least an attractive market for wave energy. So we look at locations like the US, like Western Europe, India, and so Australia, places like that to go after our patents. And like I said, every patent, not in every location, but enough in enough locations to make it difficult for people to navigate around us.
Mm-hmm. And we recently posted like a 2021 patent update as well on StartEngine. So I encourage you to go and read that update to learn more about the patents that Oscilla Power received in 2021 and their overall strategy as well. Again, so much good content and updates on the StartEngine page. So if you're not following, I do really encourage you to do so, as it will keep you most up to date with all the business traction that Oscilla Power is receiving. So haven't, go hit that little heart button. I have a great question from anonymous attendee. Are the smaller systems appropriate as an option for the Caribbean islands, or is there not enough wave energy in that geography? So is that a good place for wave energy devices in general?
So that is a good question. I've heard that a lot, and I think it's actually a really difficult one to answer, because there is a tendency for people to want, obviously you want to put devices in the areas where there is the most energy. And so from that perspective, Caribbean islands really don't have a great deal of wave energy. And that's why everybody wants to be there. I mean, they've got small waves and it's beautiful and the sun's shining and it's where you really want to be, but there isn't big storms. So, from that perspective, not really so attractive for smaller systems and island power. And I've looked at this with a couple of studies in the past, quite a few years back, but the energy intensity is pretty low. That being said, there could be some opportunity in future for a low energy environment type system, a system that's perhaps not designed to handle the most extreme conditions, but something that's just a little bit more, let's just say, lightweight, that might be more tailored to low energy environments. And that's something that we have on our minds. So, maybe it's something that we can come back to, but at this point, I would say not so much.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Awesome. Attendees, if you have any further questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Balky, I was curious if you can speak to some of your grant funding and how you're being backed by the Department of Energy. You've been working with them for quite some time. I was curious if you can speak to a little bit more about the funding that you've received from them.
Yeah, most of the funding that we have is really towards those two devices that we talked about, and that's not by accident. First I'll kind of say that the Department of Energy has made a really conscious effort to push not just wave energy, but marine energy in general towards the forefront of the next generation of activities that they're doing beyond solar and wind. And it's been a really good push over the last, I'd say, decade or so. A little behind in Europe in terms of when they came in, but they're really trying their hardest to catch up, and it's been a big help for developers like us. So the good thing about a lot of the grant opportunities is it's not like they define the opportunity in such a specific way that you don't have any flexibility in what you propose. So we can write the grant application so that it's something that we, within the guidelines of what they're asking. So they might say something generic like, the funding is for designing a wave energy device. And then we can write it so that it's designing our 1 megawatt system to go into the water and so on. So that allows us to kind of use grant funding in a very strategic way to keep progressing our overall goals forward. Occasionally, it allows us to be opportunistic, especially on the small scale systems. I'd say that we knew we wanted to go there, but we probably would not have gone there with funding that we got from investors and so on, because it's not enough to justify a the return that we expect from there is probably not enough to justify a venture type return, but it could be a nice little market that can bring in revenue in the near term. And the fact that government funds were available to go after that market allowed us to explore that and get into that space that we would otherwise not have done likely. So we've done it in a strategic way, but also in a somewhat opportunistic way in recent times.
Awesome. Attendees, if you have any questions about the grant Oscilla Power has received, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We are coming up. Yes.
Let me just jump in here. So there was one question that that George Bonner dropped in the chat earlier, but that maybe I could
Sure.
answer today. He asked about the opportunities to be able to contribute towards transportation decarbonization, green energy, green hydrogen production. And George, that's a really good question and quite relevant. And I would say the simple answer there is yes, but the question is how. And so, obviously locating large wave generation plants in a relatively close proximity to, maritime centers can enable, can contribute, I think, towards the, that movement. I think where it really starts to get interesting is if you can actually combine your wave energy generation with the hydrogen production on board, and therefore you actually eliminate the power cable potentially as a power carrier. However, which is an area I've always thought being very interesting, but there's still a number of technological challenges with doing that. First of all, the challenge of actually trying to produce hydrogen on board a moving kind of platform is challenging. But so I don't think that's in the near term, but that may be a possibility in the slightly further term. What I would say is that the big opportunity here would be to employ ocean energy power generation and have onshore, supporting hydrogen generation onshore. But then there's the argument as to whether, is hydrogen production the right thing to be doing in order to decarbonize maritime transportation? That's not an area where I'm familiar with. I know there's a number of different views there, but I think it's a great idea, and I think Wave can certainly contribute towards it for certain.
Dimitri, you're muted.
Apologies. There was some background noise. I muted myself for a little bit. I feel like that phrase is like the phrase of 2021, 2022. Oh, you're muted. We are coming up around the 10-minute mark, attendees. So we want to honor your time. If you have any lingering questions, now is the time to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A for the Oscilla Power team. Balky, Tim, in your words, why do you think we should be investing in wave energy right now? Why is now the best opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's the right combination of technology, market need, and rapid growth possibility all coming together, so that it's a good time for investors to come in and try to realize a return. This is not a software offering which you can have a very short turnaround time. And we've been able, as a company, to use grant funding, significant grant funding, close to $25 million in total between early investors and grants and so on, to get the technology to a point where now we are starting to get into the design, construction, build phase of our product. So it is a really good time to come in to help drive that forward and to realize the return in a more meaningful time frame than what is typically possible for it's a very early clean tech venture. It's a path that we went through, so we know it's a long-term prospect. But for investors coming in now, it is that type of opportunity, and we believe we can give a return in a time frame that is comparable to other venture type opportunities that we could not have promised back in, say, 2010 or so when we were founded. Mm-hmm. So great time to come in.
Yeah. And I can maybe add to that as well, is that investing in Oscilla allows you to really leverage significant grant funding that, I mean, as already mentioned, that we have already received. You know, your investment of X is already backed by at least X provided by the government to get us to this stage. Mm-hmm. Plus, the other thing to kind of note as well is that right now there is a real push from like big tech companies, your Amazons, your Googles, Microsoft, etc., to push to requiring 24/7 renewables. And so, you know, as we said right at the start of this call, wind and solar, they make a massive contribution, and they, you know, they can produce a lot of energy, and they're really good, and they are needed in the future. But what they don't necessarily do together is that they don't provide power around the clock. Wave can really help support that. I mean, you may still need storage to be able to kind of, you know, even that power out, but you add Wave into the mix, it's really allows you to mitigate the amount of storage that you add, and ultimately allow you to get to 24/7 renewables. And you know, this is something that these larger companies are requiring and are really moving towards in the near future.
And one of the reasons why I love equity crowdfunding is it is democratizing startup investing. These are opportunities were only available to high net worth individuals, VCs, angels, etc. But now with equity crowdfunding, everyday investors like me, the small person, can back companies that they believe in. And I'm a firm believer in that. As humanity just needs to shift towards cleaner energy and invest more research and time into really tapping into the resources that nature provides, like Wave. It is complex, but it's not impossible. And we should be supporting companies that are trying to make the impossible possible, like Oscilla Power. So you can invest for a very, very small amount. Again, everyday investor here. I'm not a high net worth individual, but I can still back a company I believe in and still put my money to work as well. So it's a win-win situation. So I really encourage you to check out the StartEngine page and joining the community. Oscilla Power has done a tremendous job raising funds and capital as well from the crowd. Our investor communities, like over 1,500 strong. We've raised over $1 million. So this community is growing, and there's lots of traction here to be gained in wave energy. So I'm a firm believer. I love working with Oscilla Power. I can tell you from firsthand experience, the team is incredible as well. So that's my little spiel. There's a lot of questions coming into the Q&A really quickly that I want to address. I have a question from Richard. So what are the business plans for market introduction and starting to generate revenue? Can you speak to your timelines around that, Balky, and speak to a little bit more on your growth strategy there?
Yeah, and he also asked whether it's on the portal. So maybe I'll direct him there. And I'm not sure about the compliance aspect of answering that question here as well. So Richard, let me suggest that you take a look at the portal for that information.
Yeah, and Richard, you can always please drop the question in the StartEngine page where Oscilla Power can address it as well. And then to follow up on another question from Richard around storage, is wave energy considered a reliable or inconsistent energy source? Tim, I think you'd be great.
Let me answer that one actually, and there's kind of two-pointed answer to that question, really, but I'll give you the quick version of it. In essence, over longer periods of time, wave energy is considered to be fairly constant. There is seasonal variability, but like on a day-to-day basis, it's actually very constant. That being said, on a short-term basis of second to second, it's actually quite variable. And so that's one of the challenges for us as a developer, to kind of create a much more smoother power. And that's one of the things I mentioned initially with one of the innovations that we've got and differentiations between other technologies is the ability to make that power much smoother on a second to second basis. But yes, there's still some level of variability here. There is, it's, I guess, just like wind or solar considered to be a variable renewable from a grid perspective. However, it's far less variable than those other two resources.
Right, and by combining them, you can create more consistent renewable power.
That's correct, Damaris. And the other thing to note as well, unlike solar well, especially unlike solar and definitely unlike wind, wave is much more predictable in terms of the time horizon which you can predict it in. If you look at solar, it's very difficult to predict instantaneous cloud cover. So you can get very unknown variability over minutes to hours. Now, wind, it's better. You can predict it maybe a day out or maybe a day and a half out to a good level of certainty. With waves, you can actually get almost a whole week out to get really quite accurate forecasts for wave heights. And you have been able to for a while, but even with just regular models, but more advanced models can be really quite accurate. And that actually just increases the value of the power to the utility. So it's good from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Richard says, thanks. Thanks, Richard, for all your great questions. Again, some of your questions, definitely drop them on the StartEngine page in the comments section where Oscilla Power can address that question directly. We are coming up on time here, about 5 minutes left. Any last minute burning questions, get them in now. I would like to say though, thank you for everyone for coming out today. I know everyone has incredibly busy schedules, and to carve out an hour of your day to join us and learn more about Oscilla Power really means a lot to us. Again, I can't emphasize enough, please follow the campaign page. It's a little heart button right below the terms of the offering where you can follow, and you'll get all the updates that we post directly on the StartEngine page directly into your inbox. So it's a really great way to stay updated, especially as I know the Triton C is getting ready for deployment and updates are being made at the site. You're not going to want to miss those updates. So again, please follow the page and then invest as well. If you really believe the next move in clean energy is wave and you see the market opportunity, now's the time. I think the best investment advice I ever received was to invest early, because time is only your best friend there. So put your dollars in early and let time work its magic as well. Any last thoughts from Tim, Balky, from you guys as well as we're closing up our event today?
I would just like to thank everybody for being present and asking some great questions. It's always fun to answer these questions. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for being present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you have additional questions, please go to the StartEngine page and use the Q&A portal there to post your questions. And we will have additional events like these as well as we move forward. So you'll have additional opportunities at that time. Thank you again for participating and for the great questions.
Yes, thank you guys so much. Again, don't be strangers. Please reach out, drop any questions you might have anytime in the StartEngine page, and spread the word as well. We need your help to grow our community. And if you know people, colleagues, friends, family that also believe in moving towards clean energy sources, here's a perfect opportunity to make that a reality and allow us to tap into wave energy. So please share the StartEngine page, the Raise page, chat about it with your friends and family. We'd just love to see our community grow even more. So any final thoughts, anyone from anyone? We got a couple minutes left. All right, well, I'm going to close it down today. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a great Thursday. Have a great weekend. We wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.